I was getting into jazz, getting into classical music. Then my parents deemed that I needed to go to the great teacher. So I go, and it was like a dreaded day, and I was not very serious at that time. I was about 14 years old. And I loved playing I loved the concept of playing the clarinet, but I didn't practice at all. Not a lick, you know. And in fact, that was a moment as well, right around the time I was going to go see Russianoff. And my mother and I were washing the dishes. Yeah, I remember this really clearly. And we're washing the dishes together. And she looks at me and she says, you know, David, you could be, if you keep going the way you're going, you'll probably learn to play the clarinet pretty well, and you'll be, maybe you'll be a good club date musician. You know, you can do a few, I mean, now I know that club date musicians are super skilled. I would, but that was her, you know, yeah, you could maybe play a little bit or be an amateur or play some club dates. Maybe you'll get to that level. She said, or you could start getting to work and really become excellent, but it's your choice. And kept going, scrub the dishes. That was the smartest move she ever made. And that, you know, with me, I tend to usually be like, you know, the bull with the red flag. Like sometimes things get me mad and then I get motivated, or get me upset and get me motivated to move to the next step. And that seed was sown. So anyway, this was the dreaded day. I'm thinking Leon Russianoff, and this man is going to come to the door in a suit and tie, very starched, very formal, and I'm going to be totally intimidated, and he's just going to tell me to basically pack up and go home, you know, and I was dreading this thing. So we go to Leon Russianoff's studio, which was at 1595 Broadway. The building does not exist anymore. It was one of those 4-story kind of music buildings. The second floor was a massage parlor. And so, you know, that was always interesting. Later on, when I went for lessons, you know, the 15-year-old kid, and the door would open. The room was bathed in red light. There were women in the shortest skirts you can imagine, just sitting there, a row of them, and then the door would close again. And it was just, it was pretty funny. And people were handing out handbills for the various massage. This was in the early 70s, pretty new. The Times Square area was pretty skanky back then. So this is the building, and there was on the 3rd floor was the King brand music, where they did this incredible like photocopying that looked like printing. It was actually like almost raised printing. So you would get a photocopy that looked better than the original. It was amazing. That was King brand. And John Glazell ran that store, and he was the president of the Musicians Union, and I found out later had played trumpet with Bob Wilbur in this band, and they recorded with Sidney Bechet in the late 1940s as teenagers. So, and I knew nothing. Otherwise, I would be sitting here like you're sitting here with me interviewing John Glazell, because I would have like, what was it like to play with Sidney Bechet? But anyway, all that being said, I show up, 1595 Broadway, go up to the 4th floor, and this building is like dilapidated, filthy old, you know. The door opens. There's this guy, comes to the door with oshbagosh overalls and sneakers. He's got, his hair is all messy, bushy sideburns. You know, he says, "Come on in, son," with his beautiful Brooklyn accent. And right away, I felt better. And the floor was covered with cigarette paper and reeds, and I mean, it wasn't horribly messy, but there was a sort of nice disarray, and I enjoyed that too. I wasn't like, oh, okay, this might work out okay. And I remember playing the Schumann fantasy pieces for him, and I played it horribly. I was horrible. I just kept, I mean, I couldn't even really, I think I could barely read music is what it was, and it just was like making mistakes, and so Russianoff, and this was always his great thing, he was a master psychologist. He said, well, son, you're a bit of an amateur, but I'll whip you into shape in no time. So he was always a master of saying where he thought you were. He would not paint, he wouldn't paint rosy pictures for you. He wouldn't BS you. He was a straight shooter, and he just told the truth, but he always gave you this incredible path of hope. And then it was also interesting how he handled my parents, because my mother had studied with Ivan Galamian, and they were like saying to him, he's playing jazz, he's playing saxophone, we're scared he's going to ruin his classical embouchure.
Really worried about him.
Yeah. So first of all, my Russianoff knew that he had to take control as my mentor, but again, always very crafty. So he looks at my mother, and he said, Galamian was the Russianoff of the fiddle. So, but he's joking, but it wasn't a joke. He was like, he said, you studied with Galamian. Well, he's the Russianoff of the fiddle. And then, of course, they laughed. But he immediately was showing his place as one of the top 5 clarinet teachers in the world. I mean, one uncontestably at that time. And then he said, well, your son should play jazz, and he should play saxophone because that's his passion, and it's a crazy market out there, and he's got to be as versatile as possible and competitive. So he should do all of these things. And that right away was amazing, that Leon Russianoff had that vision and also that openness to say, if you see someone with passion, you don't squash their passion. If someone comes in and says, I play the clarinet and I also am into hip hop and I'm a rapper and I'm producing music, you're like, great, do everything, do it all. I mean, there are so many Renaissance people out there who can do it all. So I think Leon Russianoff was a great, he was a pioneer in that way of having that openness towards teaching. He wasn't like, get an orchestra job or get out of my studio, or be a soloist with orchestra or get out of my studio.